When Linda Kensington threatened my vibrant garden with legal action, I knew it was time to let the petals of rebellion bloom. In the early morning light, just as dew sparkled on the petals of my vibrant flower garden, a formidable figure stood across the street, arms crossed and lips pursed like a tightrope. There she was, Linda Kensington, the infamous enforcer of the Westwood Homeowners Association. Known throughout the neighborhood, she had zero tolerance for anything that didn't fit into her rigid mold of suburban perfection. Today, she had targeted my jungle of color, a sanctuary I had cultivated from barren earth into a riot of blossoms. Each flower was a music note in my happy symphony, and Linda, with her stormy presence, was the grim conductor hell-bent on silence. Linda wasn't just another disgruntled neighbor. She was a self-appointed queen, armed with the weighty regulations of the HOA like a knight in shining armor, ready to slay any creativity that dared to thrive in the kingdom of Westwood. I stood amidst my dahlias and lavender, the sun warming my back, my heart thudding at the thought of her verbal assault. "Those flowers are violating HOA codes, you know," she boomed, her voice strident, echoing like an awful alarm in the peaceful morning. As the yell echoed between the neatly trimmed hedges and perfectly mowed lawns, I could almost feel the vibrancy of my blossoms dimming under her harsh gaze. Her long, lacquered nails pointed accusingly at the petals swaying softly in the breeze. I glanced at my garden, an explosion of colors that had become my pride. Each plant bore a story of survival rescued from garden centers, gifted from friends, or bartered treasures from summers past. My heart raced with anger, determination surging through my veins like a storm brewing on the horizon. How dare she threaten to rip apart the carefully woven tapestry of life I had worked tirelessly to create? With each harsh word she hurled my way, I felt my resolve grow stronger, urging me to stand my ground. According to Section 3.5 of the HOA guidelines, any landscaping that deviates from traditional aesthetics must be approved by the committee, which I'm sad to say you failed to do, she continued, her tone dripping with disapproval. The smooth cadence of her declaration felt like the clink of handcuffs being locked around my creativity. The HOA would not win this time. I had made my garden a sanctuary of colors and fragrances, a haven not just for myself but for bees and butterflies also, and I wasn't going to let Linda strip that away. I took a deep breath, my inner spirit slowly raging against her ruly wildfire simmering beneath the surface. Linda's dark eyeshadow framed her narrowed eyes, making her appear even more menacing as she waved her hand dismissively like she was swatting away a fly. Her tightly pinned hair gleamed in the sunlight, giving her an almost extraordinary aura that felt more threatening than celebrated. "If you don't take immediate action, I assure you the HOA will levy a hefty fine. And truthfully, you can't afford that kind of reputation in this neighborhood." I could hear the delight in her voice at the opportunity to exert her power. I was the target of her cruelty, the unwitting choice for her self-righteous crusade against beauty. But with every word she spoke, she dug her own grave deeper. I could feel the creative sparks within me igniting into a blazing flame. I envisioned what my garden could look like if I rebelled against the rules. I would create a sanctuary not of mere flowers, but of a rainforest-an explosion of life, resistant to conformity. What if I planted a deeper array of plants, exotic ferns, wild tropical blooms? Would she be able to impose her bitter scorn on a landscape that perceived its own existence as a miniature ecosystem instead of an aesthetic crime? "You can't silence me with your rules, Linda," I called out, my voice ringing with newfound strength. I could see my neighbors glancing out from behind their blinds, their lips curling in curiosity as to how this little confrontation would unfold. With a newfound passion swelling within me, I pointed toward my blooms defiantly. "I will turn this property into a living tapestry, and you won't be able to do a single thing to stop me." The words came out hot and fierce, fueled by the fire she sparked in my heart. I watched the flicker of surprise dance briefly across her face before she masked it with her signature scowl. As I turned back towards my garden, a wild energy surged through me. The fight ignited the seed of rebellion that had long been buried under layers of complacency. Each flower represented not just refuge but a defiance against Linda's oppressive rule. I would transform my garden into a bold display that would spark community discussions and inspire others to reflect on their own gardens with pride and joy rather than fear and hostility. Let her come with her codes, let her come with her complaints. I was ready to embrace the chaos, to cultivate a jungle more breathtaking than she had ever imagined. Unfazed by Linda's threats, I dove headfirst into a vibrant transformation of my yard, just as the sun began to sink in the early evening sky, painting the clouds with hues of pink and orange. I planted sunflowers that towered high above my head, their golden faces turned towards the sun, as if they were sharing my defiance. The marigolds, bursting like molten gold along the edges, welcomed every passerby with their cheerful brilliance while I reveled in my blossoming rebellion. With each payload of dirt I turned, I could almost hear Linda's furious gasps echoing through the neighborhood. Her overbearing presence loomed like a storm cloud, but I didn't flinch. I welcomed the challenge. My excitement was met with furious glances from Linda, who stood on her porch like a looming sentinel. With her arms crossed tightly and her disapproving frown etched deep across her face, she pointedly watched me, her discontent a palpable force on my whimsical blooms. I could almost sense her mind churning, a storm of pent-up frustration brewing within her. Just as I began to feel the thrill of victory wash over me, a letter from her emerged like a chilling wind, demanding hefty fines for my so-called excessive biodiversity. Who knew that planting flowers could provoke such icy hostility? Instead of retreating in fear, I picked up my phone and called my friends, inviting them over for a planting party. We smashed the evening silence with laughter and lighthearted banter, our conversations dancing through the air like the sunflowers swaying in the warm summer breeze. I still remember the way my friends' laughter echoed while we dug our hands into the soil, shaping an oasis that was undeniably ours, starkly contrasting with the bitterness emanating from Linda's cold glare across the street. As she continued scolding me via formal letters, delivering her stern ultimatums with a flourish, I felt something shift within me. Each reprimand hardened my resolve to show her that I wouldn't be intimidated. I plotted a more audacious countermeasure, the glimmer of mischief alight in my heart as I imagined something grandeur kaleidoscope of plants intertwining around a small fountain bubbling cheerfully amidst the chaos. What if I invited anyone who had ever filed a complaint against their own property or felt threatened by Linda's reign? It would be a band of colorful revolutionaries in the face of mediocrity, united by flowers and freedom. Encouraged by thoughts of rebellion, I waddled down to the garden store after voters had finished dining. That day was a vivid smudge of thrills and victories consumed within a steaming cup of freshly brewed Esperanza. As I meandered through the aisles, the scent of rosemary and thyme ignited my senses. I collected more seeds and vibrant seedlings than I had dared imagine a week earlier. Colors began to whirl and mingle, and my imagination danced wildly as I pored over exotic varieties of ferns and tropical flowers suited for my expanding flora playground. The idea of slapping Linda with an ultra-botanical display of vibrant chaos had me racing through the checkout line, barely deterred by the clanking of the cash register. The scene unfolding in my yard transformed into a hallmark of spring every weekend. Laughter filled the air as friends and neighbors stepped over the threshold of thrift and skepticism. Slowly but surely, my garden evolved into a welcoming Junglian explosion of life that acted as a refuge not only for myself but for all. And while Linda continued to shriek behind closed doors, scribbling yet another complaint, I noticed more curious neighbors watching us from behind their screens, eyes flickering from their warm dwelling, watching our hearts blossom. My blossoming sanctuary was no longer a solitary act but a shared triumph against the suffocating grip of HOA oppression. Days turned into weeks, and while I oversaw the expansion of my floral retreat, Linda's retaliation became more relentless. In the most recent letter, she demanded fines for every aspect of my extravagant garden, deeming it a violation of property standards. The sheer absurdity of it tasted bitter in my mouth. I could see her stormy features receding in rage as she imagined her once immaculate neighborhood overrun by weeds and chaos. But I had noticed a change in the overall atmosphere. My neighbors, emboldened by my extravagant splendor, circulated whispers of mutual support for the flowers, stunned at the audacity to defy Linda's rule. As exciting as these developments sounded, I knew without doubt that the battle was far from over. Rather than retreating, her bitterness had transformed her into a monster, relentless, eager to crush any whisper of nonconformity that threatened her grip on the neighborhood. But with every letter of condemnation, my garden remained vibrant and alive, a testament that even the toughest storms couldn't erode the beauty sprouting from the cracks of conformity. I was determined to show Linda that I had planted not just flowers but the seeds of hope and resilience, ready to bloom forever in the shadow of her tyranny. As summer bloomed, I began an ambitious project turning my backyard into a lush tropical oasis, complete with palm trees and a small fountain, all modestly within the HOA regulations, yet conspicuously whimsical to irk Linda. The sun poured down like liquid gold, bathing my flowers in a warm embrace, while my dream took root in every corner of my yard. I planted vibrant hibiscus and fragrant jasmine, allowing their soft scents to drift on the balmy breeze. Every seed I sowed seemed to echo my defiance, a joyous yell against conformity. What began as a simple rebellion had transformed into a vivid tapestry of colors and textures that danced under the sun, enticing glances from curious neighbors. Soon, the daily symphony of bright colors and chirping birds caught the eyes of other residents, and a sense of camaraderie grew among those who appreciated my vision of creative freedom. My garden drew them in like moths to a flame, their curiosity igniting conversations over morning coffees and evening strolls. I welcomed visitors to share my sanctuary, hoping they would see in my creation what I saw was a symbol of individuality blooming defiantly in the face of Linda's imposing standards. It felt invigorating to foster this community spirit. The air crackled with excitement as more homeowners whispered their admiration for my work. However, as the flowers flourished, so did the complaints. Linda couldn't bear to see her influence eroding, and with each blossoming petal, I could almost hear her simmering rage boiling over. Annoyed by the happiness radiating from my yard, she retaliated with harsher fines and veiled threats of legal action, claiming I was breaking community protocols. Even the sight of my whimsical fountain, its waters sparkling like diamonds beneath the sun, became a point of contention in her eyes. My heart raced as I faced the escalating stakes. Despite my blossoming, vibrant retreat, I felt the pressure crushing down, an oppressive weight threatening to extinguish my newfound joy. While I relished in the friendship sprouting amid my flowers, I knew I wasn't just fighting for my garden anymore. I felt like David taking on Goliath each time Linda sank another letter into my mailbox, her cold judgment stinging like the remnants of winter frost. It was disheartening to open those letters, punctuated with threats of legal action or fuming accusations that my garden was but an eyesore in her carefully curated neighborhood. I wanted nothing more than to turn my backyard into a haven, not just for myself but for others who yearned to see the petals of life flourish. Yet Linda's encroaching grasp felt like a dark shadow looming over my paradise. The cumulative stress of her complaints fueled my determination further. I resolved to state my case, to transform my garden trial into a celebration of freedom. With each uproarious demand from Linda, new ideas sprouted in my mind. I could see it now, a neighborhood gathering rooted deeply in collaboration. We could all plant and celebrate our passions together. Inviting others to share in my plight would make Linda's hold weaker and rally support against her bitter reign. It was time to show her that the beauty of nature somehow thrived best in chaos, vibrant and unpredictable like the laughter of friends. So, amidst the vibrant chaos and harried whispers, I organized a garden gala event where neighbors could share their own vibrant ambitions, and for one day, they could literally plant their dreams alongside my tropical oasis. Flyers wafted through the neighborhood, promising an afternoon of fun and creativity in the garden that had become an unexpected sanctuary. The excitement bubbled within me like the melting heat of summer. It felt utterly liberating to envision a community unified against conformity and fear. As the day of our gathering approached, I witnessed a flurry of activity in my backyard. Fellow gardeners arrived, bringing their own seeds and ideas along with laughter and joy. Together, we created a riot of colors, laughter echoing as we knelt in the dirt, planting ferns and daisies side by side. The surreal horror of hearing Linda condemn us faded into the background, overtaken by the brilliant spectacle of unity and creative freedom blossoming before our eyes. I soaked in the vibrant energy, more resilient than ever, recognizing that I was no longer alone, but part of something greater, a movement against the suffocating clutches of HOA oppression. But just as I reveled in our collective joy, the unease returned as I remembered Linda's relentless nature. She was not the kind to back down easily, her bitterness lurking like a predator, watching our every move with threat lingering in the air. It was clear to me that while our gathering radiated beauty and camaraderie, Linda's fury was poised to strike back. I felt both invigorated and fearful. Would my garden thrive alongside this newfound support, or would I be caught in the brunt of Linda's desperate attempt to maintain her rule over the neighborhood? My mind raced with questions: how far would she go to crush our spirit? Ultimately, I believed that as long as my flowers bloomed, I could cultivate hope within my community and stand ready for the confrontation that seemed imminent over the horizon. Tensions reached a boiling point one fateful evening as the sun slipped beneath the horizon, casting an eerie glow over my garden. I had just finished watering the last of my daisies when, without warning, I heard a sharp knock on my door. It was Linda Kensington, her shadow looming like a dark cloud over the vibrant blossoms I had nurtured with such care. With her clipboard clutched tightly in one hand, her lips twisted into a disapproving frown, she seemed every bit the vindictive adversary I had come to expect. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks as I opened the door, ready to defend every inch of my beloved sanctuary. "Good evening," she began, her voice dripping with disdain. "I'm here to collect overdue dues for your infractions." The very words made my skin crawl. She rattled off a list of alleged violations, each more absurd than the last, claiming my flowers had transformed my yard into an eyesore that would lower property values. I could hardly contain my laughter. How could a blooming garden be ugly? Each colorful petal seemed to mock her narrow-mindedness, urging me to stand tall in my defense. I bristled at her accusations and managed to retort, "You can't honestly tell me that people find a garden full of life and color unattractive." Linda's eyes narrowed, her posture firm and her tone unwavering. In that moment, it wasn't merely about my flowers. It was about her need to exert power over me, as if my joy was a direct affront to her authority. I realized she was relentless, feeding on the very fear she instilled in others, and I was becoming fed up with it. Before she left, armed with her clipboard of threats, she dropped the bombshell, a lawsuit claiming I was violating property codes. It hit me like a freight train, the wind knocked clean out of my sails. My dreams of creating a serene oasis were suddenly eclipsed by a storm of legal troubles looming threateningly over my colorful garden. What had started as a peaceful act of rebellion had now morphed into an uphill battle, as my spirit wavered against the unexpected weight of despair. How had things gone so wrong? That night, I sat outside among the flowers, feeling lost. My vibrant sanctuary felt less like a haven and more like a target. The moon hung high, illuminating the drops of dew clinging to the petals, and I tried to reignite the visions of camaraderie I once had. But the bitterness of Linda's threats left an acrid taste in my mouth. I had built something beautiful with the hope it would inspire others, yet here I was, questioning my choices. Had I been too bold, or was it time to dig my heels in deeper? Over the ensuing days, despair morphed into stubborn resolve. I wasn't going to let Linda take away my passion without a fight. I recalled all of the support I had garnered when we celebrated the garden gala, how we had stood together against her disdain. It dawned on me that I wasn't alone. The community I had fostered was still there, simmering beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to act. I decided that instead of retreating, I would rally my neighbors once again. I began organizing an emergency meeting, inviting everyone who had enjoyed the garden gala to join me in this fight for not only my garden but for everyone's right to express their creativity. As the days passed, I could feel the tide turning in my favor. Neighbors who once remained silent now stepped forward, willing to stand alongside me against the tyranny of Linda and her HOA. I could see in their eyes a shared desire for change, a yearning for the freedom to cultivate our aspirations without fear of oppression. When the meeting day arrived, the energy was palpable. Neighbors took their seats, and I felt a rush of adrenaline course through me. I gathered my notes, determined to make my case loud and clear. With each story that echoed through the room, people sharing how my garden had brightened their spirits, sparked joy, and invited conversations, I felt the weight of Linda's threats begin to lift. Together, we would challenge her reign, and I would reclaim my joy for myself and my community. As I stepped to the front, ready to speak, I felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. This was no longer just about my flowers. This was about standing firm against the darkness that sought to stifle our imaginations. The chorus of voices rallied behind me, and as I began to share my own passion, for the first time in what felt like ages, I saw the possibility of real change shining brightly ahead, like my garden glowing under the moonlight. Instead of caving in, I rallied my neighbors for support, determined to take the fight directly to the heart of the HOA's fortress. With both excitement and trepidation coursing through me, I crafted an invitation for the meeting that would shake the very foundation of Linda Kensington's reign. I sent an email, filled with enthusiasm and fire, reaching out to everyone who had enjoyed my garden or had felt the sting of Linda's overreach in the past. Together, we made a pact to unite our voices, amplifying personal testimonies of the joy my garden had brought to our community. As word spread, my neighbors began to buzz with anticipation, their spirits circling around the hope that we could challenge Linda's tyrannical rule. The evening of the HOA meeting arrived, vibrant and electric with potential. Under the dim, fluorescent lights, the room filled with familiar faces, some smiling with warm encouragement, while others wore expressions of resolve, their jaws set against our common enemy. I stood in the back for a moment, hypnotized by the sight of our once silent community, now alive with intensity and passion. It was a sea of defiance to match my own. I could hear the murmur of conversations, a tapestry of shared stories weaving into a cohesive fight against the bitter withering of our neighborhood's spirit. This meeting was no longer just about a few flower beds. It was about reclaiming our right to express ourselves as individuals within a community that should thrive on creativity, not choke it before it could bloom. As the meeting progressed, Linda Kensington sat at the front, the embodiment of rigidity, her stern gaze flicking like a snake's tongue over the assembled crowd. She maintained her usual brow-furrowing frown, exuding icy authority with every scathing comment she dispensed about standards and aesthetic protocols. But her attempts to undermine us only fueled the determination surging through my veins. I watched as one neighbor after another stood to share their stories, eloquently speaking about how my flowers had changed their lives. A retired couple shared how the colors brought comfort to their morning coffee rituals, while another mother described how my garden had become a sanctuary for her children to play and learn about nature. It felt like petals of gratitude blossoming into the air, each voice rising higher, a chorus prepared to drown out Linda's petty disapproval. Finally, it was my turn. As I took the floor, I felt an overwhelming rush of adrenaline. My heart pounded violently against my ribcage, a mix of fear and excitement roaring through me like the waterfall I had placed in my garden. I grasped the sides of the podium, calming myself, focusing on the faces staring back at Mother Hope's, radiating like the sun through my flowering trees. I thought about all the tears I had shed over this garden, and how it had transformed not only my yard but our very neighborhood. My voice emerged, strong and steady, infused with passion and purpose as I told them what every petal, every leaf, represented freedom, creativity, and a sanctuary against the cold, hard laws that tried to define us. I poured my heart into my words, each one flowing effortlessly like water from the fountain I had constructed as a centerpiece in my garden. I urged everyone to reclaim our identity from Linda's overbearing authority. How could a gardenia blossoming celebration of life be viewed as a burden rather than a blessing? As I spoke, I could see the awareness growing in my neighbors' eyes, their nods of agreement buoying me onward. The atmosphere shifted palpably, each voice quieting and then rising again, excitement radiating off the walls, becoming an undeniable force in our mission. I could feel the tides turning, the weight of our collective discontent building beneath us, like a tidal wave ready to crash down on the facade of Linda's oppressive regime. After I concluded, a hush fell over the room. Moments later, Linda's face twisted into an expression that could only be described as vulnerability, momentarily peeling back the layers of her icy demeanor. She wanted nothing more than to douse our flames, her face revealing the realization that our resolve was genuine and unwavering. As the floor opened for discussion, voices sprang forth even louder. Neighbors who had hidden their opinions in the shadows emerged, expressing their frustrations and demands for change. This was no longer a showcase of my garden, it had become a powerful movement, celebrating resilience against oppressive limitations. As we voted, I held my breath, my heart pounding in unity with every tick of the seconds dragging by like a summer afternoon. Linda's brow furrowed deeper still, and for the first time she appeared genuinely rattled by the sheer force of community spirit in action. When the results of the vote came in, my pulse surged through me like a rocket. The majority favored my garden beautiful, chaotic display of color over Linda's narrow, joyless aesthetics. The applause that followed was thunderous, echoing through the hall as though it were bursting free from the constraints of our previous fears. In that moment, my flowers seemed to bloom brighter in my mind, bursting through the cracks in every hesitation that never dared to hold them back. Linda, with her powdered brows and stony silence, was not only faced with a humbling defeat, but also stripped of her guise as the ever-present authority in our community. She had been revealed as the true villain of our suburban fairy tale, and we had etched a new narrative together, a narrative where creativity, joy, and community would reign supreme. As we left the meeting, something shifted in the air. Laughter and camaraderie wafted around us like the sweet fragrance of my flowers stretching toward the sky. We had triumphed, and our neighborhood would forever remember this as the day we fought for our dreams and found strength together.